Namaskar and welcome to Sansad Television. I am Vishal Dahiya and you're watching our special show Perspective, where we bring you a detailed analysis of all key international and national issues as well. Today we're going to talk about the big thing which has happened. That is the sale of Air India to Tata Sons. Now, in fact, the Cabinet Committee on Economic Affairs, that is CCEA empowered Air India specific alternative mechanism, has approved the highest price bid of Talace Pvt Ltd, a wholly owned subsidiary of Tata Sons Pvt Ltd, for sale of 100% equity shareholding of Government of India in Air India, along with equity shareholding of Air India in AIXL and AISATS. Now, Tata Sons bid quoted an enterprise value of 18,000 crore rupees, which include the debt of 15,300 crore, and which it will take over, in addition to 2,700 crore cash that will go to the Government of India. Now, this offer was nearly 40% higher than the reserve price of 12,906 crore rupees set by the government, and 19% more than what rival bidder, a consortium led by SpiceJet CMD Ajay Singh, had offered. In fact, the transaction does not include non-core assets, including land and building, which is valued at 14,718 crore rupees, which are to be transferred to Government of India's Air India Asset Holding Limited. Now, the remaining part of Air India's 61,562 crore debt, which is the outstanding at the end of August, will be borne by the government. In this episode, we will discuss various aspects of Tata's takeover of Air India and also the challenges before the new owners of Maharaja in their journey from here onwards. And for more on this, we're joined by a distinguished panel of experts. Let me first introduce them to you, beginning with, we have with us Dr. Sanat Kaul here, Chairman of International Foundation for Aviation and Drone, in the studio with me. And we are also joined by Mr. Sanjiv Bajaj, President Designate Confederation of Indian Industry, that is CII, and Mr. Jitendra Bhargava, former Executive Director of Air India, is also joining us. Let me begin with you, Dr. Kaul, and let's first start by understanding what has actually happened here. This is one deal which was being pushed for quite some time now, a very long time. In 2017, a fresh push was given also, and then again it took around 4 years for this to happen. How significant do you think this disinvestment of Air India is?
Actually, it is very significant, and in fact, one should go back even more. 2001. 2001 was when it was practically sold to Tatas. It was a proper process done through an advisory company, and it was Tata and Singapore Airline had a joint bid, and it was sold. I mean, it was not sold to them, but the last minute Singapore Airline backed out, and then they were asked, Tata were asked that they were allowed to find another partner because they didn't want to do it alone at that time. They didn't have any airline experience left with them. And they were looking for another airline to partner with them when 9/11 took place, within 10 to 2 weeks, I think, of the same time.
Okay.
So the entire world airline industry was out. And then Tata said, we can't do it. It collapsed. 2014, government change, they decided not to divest. And then came the new government again.
In 2014.
2014, but they have taken quite some time to take a final decision, but it's a great decision. It's very good, and the fact that it's gone to Tata's, it was going to Tata's in 2001, it's gone again to them. It's great news.
Okay.
But the government has bled in the meantime because of wrong policies of merger and a whole lot of issues which we may or may not discuss. And the taxpayers have bled. And the amount of debt which the government is taking on just now is huge. So it's a great relief to the government and to the taxpayers that it's sold, but at the same time, the sale has been to an outstandingly good party, which is already running 2 airlines, and I presume they will decide how to manage the 3rd airline. They will probably merge it, but if they don't, I mean, it's up to them to decide. But it's a great news, and I think congratulations to everybody due now.
Indeed. And since you mentioned the 2001 part there, I still remember the then Disinvestment Minister Arun Jaitley making that statement that we should disinvest Air India as quickly as possible, otherwise there'll be nothing left to disinvest there. Yeah. And that is a very, very important thing, something which is, stuck on till this particular day. Let me bring you in here, Mr. Bhargava. Since you've been with Air India, it's sort of homecoming when we are looking at the Air India sale to Tatas. But the question I have to you is, if you could take us through what exactly were the travails of Air India, you know, what exactly ailed this national carrier, Maharaja?
You see, the history of Air India has been a great one, and there are certain phases that we need to look into. Say, for example, when it was nationalized in 1953, till 1978, J.R.D. Tata continued to helm the airline. He provided visionary leadership. There was little political interference in the working of Air India. And Air India conquered great heights, was globally known as one of the finest airlines that the world had.
Mm-hmm.
Since 78, things have changed and they've not been the same. There was a winning formula that J.R.D. Tata had provided, but no heed was paid to the winning formula. And a series of things took place, one after the other. The chairmen who were being appointed were for short duration, political interference had started, and Air India ceased to be what it was at one time. When the competition became intense in the 1990s, when foreign airlines were given bilateral rights more frequently and domestic skies were opened up, that was the time when Air India needed able leadership, but unfortunately it did not get. The unfortunate part is that from the year 2003 onwards, only bureaucrats have helmed the airline.
Okay.
And they have also been changed too frequently with no sense of commitment. The losses have only gone up and market share has gone down. Public perception has gone down of Air India. So a stage has come, or had come, I would say, where disinvestment was inevitable. Mm-hmm. Take the year 99-2000, when the first attempt was made, it did not succeed. 2017-18, it again did not succeed. Government eventually realized that they must exit Air India totally and not try and hold a part of the equity. So this time, notwithstanding the pandemic, its impact on the aviation industry, Tata submitted the bid after doing due diligence. And after having put in a financial bid, they were adjudged the best. Though I have often maintained that since Tata's created Air India, government should have gracefully returned Air India to Tata's and said, look, if we have not been able to maintain the status of Air India, please take it back and get the glory back for Air India as it was when it was under the control of Tata's or when J.R.D. Tata was helming the airline.
Okay.
But unfortunate part is the government paid no heed. With the result, Air India got marginalized. And for those people who believe that, look, Air India could have continued without disinvestment, my message to them is, Air India, after being India's #1 airline, has lost market share. It has been marginalized to such an extent that only 1 in 8 passengers patronize Air India in the domestic sector and 1 in 6 on the international sector.
Okay.
So if the disinvestment had not gone through, you would have only seen Air India being further marginalized because India's private carriers are expanding their fleet. Air India could not have expanded the fleet because of shortage of funds. All the Tata fund, when you look at it, we are very hopeful that Tata will get the glory back for Air India.
Okay.
But one point that is significant and must be mentioned is that Air India brings to Tata enormous value from which they can build further. Because a lot of people believe, or they've written of Air India, though my contention is that Air India may not have been as good an airline as it ought to have been, but is also not as bad an airline as it is made out to be.
Okay.
So when you look at the global network of Air India, none of the Indian carriers fly to Europe, United States, Australia, Japan, etc. It's only Air India. Once startups have got this formidable network, they will build upon it.
Okay.
They will ensure that the service is of gold standard. So once all these things come back, the aura that Air India commanded in the 1950s, 60s, 70s, etc.
Indeed, that's a huge network which you're referring to, Mr. Bhargava, and we'll come to that part as well, how that can be, built upon by Tata's and, further sort of improve the health of not only Air India, but overall the aviation sector as well. Let me bring in Mr. Sanjiv Bajaj here. Mr. Bajaj, emotional issue apart, Air India going back to Tata's. What's the business logic behind this decision by Tata's to go ahead and bid for Air India? If you understand, because it's a loss-making entity, and if you look at Tata's aviation business also, they're not making profits there, either in Vistara or AirAsia.
So Vishal, I can't talk for the Tatas, but sometimes, you want the baby to come back home and help nurture it into becoming the adult that it was earlier. The Tatas are one of the few groups that have an airline experience. So let's hope that they can combine that. And as Mr. Bhargav said, there are lucrative routes over there, which nobody else has. Plus, after the last decade and the pandemic over the last year and a half, the industry is starting to grow now. So in many ways, the timing is a good timing. But I'm not an expert on the airline industry. You have Dr. Kaul and Mr. Bhargav there, so they can probably answer that better. But let me take a step back over here and tell you why this is important, both for the government, for Indian industry, and for India. See, the first, as has already been told, it's a 20-year effort to try and sell a very large public sector undertaking, a non-strategic one. That has finally gone through. I think we must all acknowledge that this is a big shot in the arm for the government to now say that we can walk the talk. So that's the first point. Second, it's a big confidence, a show of confidence to the private sector. Governments are always worried that, if you're going to the private sector, what are unions going to say? What are other politicians going to say? What's the opposition going to say? The government has reposed this confidence in the private sector, and I hope that we can demonstrate our ability to move ahead. Third, we've talked about the losses so far. There are a bunch of other points, but we can come to it as you want me to, Vishal.
Okay. Indeed, those are very key aspects there, showing the faith in the private sector there. Dr. Kaul, if we have to understand this overall story, and let's look at it from the domestic aviation sector as well. How do you think this sale of Air India to Tata will have an impact on the overall domestic aviation, companies which are already operating there? And let's remember that Air India has a very big chunk of the market.
Okay, I think we have to take domestic and international together, because Air India is an international airline also.
Indeed.
Now, 70% or so of the traffic today is low-cost carrier. They have captured it. And therefore, Tatas have an uphill task, but they have AirAsia and they have Air India Express. So that part they will take care of. But now to build up a full-service airline within domestic sector is also there, because the wealth is going up in India. India is becoming richer, and therefore there are a lot of people who would like to travel business, and they are providing that kind of service now. India's outbound is fantastic. It's growing by leaps and bounds. It's more than the incoming international. So Indians going abroad, Tatas have a great scope to catch them, because the tradition, the brand value of Air India, if they can revive it, they'll be able to get a good chunk of the traffic, which is growing very fast. We are expecting, of course, all this, that after COVID-19, everything is going to come back, and not only that, the growth will be very good. So both on international and domestic, now they have the low-cost airline as well as the, within Air India, they have low-cost airline as well as the full-service airline. So I don't see how they're going to be disadvantaged. In fact, they have the combination of the two, and if they enter, Air India is already in the Udan area, which is the regional setup. So within that, I think they'll be able to do pretty well if they put their act together properly.
Okay. So you're saying that it's going to be a lot of effort which will take, but finally with these assets in place, Tatas can make use of Air India and obviously the other two aviation companies which it runs, that is Vistara and AirAsia as well. Mr. Bhargava, you're earlier mentioning about how lucrative routes which Air India has. That's obviously one advantage there. The other, if you look at in terms of not only the problems aspect, the challenges aspect, if you are looking at the state of the airplanes which Air India has, then professionalism as far as that is concerned, that is something which has been pointed out by various experts, something which Tatas will have to deal with.
See, the disinvestment will make a whole lot of difference to Air India. There is no denying the fact that Air India has suffered in recent years because of decision making, because of lack of leadership, and this has impacted the morale of the employees, further affecting the service standards. So when we look at Air India in totality, when we say it is not just the lucrative routes that Air India is bringing for the Tatas, it is a large number of pilots, 2,000 plus pilots, highly experienced and trained, aircraft maintenance engineers, cabin crew. So we have to look at the aeronautical assets that Air India has, because government has very wisely set aside the non-aeronautical assets like Air India building in Mumbai, real estate, etc. But the aeronautical assets that they are going to be transferred to Tatas will mean a lot for Tatas to build over it. One will always say, yes, there has been lack of professionalism in Air India. It stems out of government ownership. If you do not provide the right leadership at the department level, the morale will be low, the work standards will not be the same. Because we all know that unions have had a very strong kind of role in Air India, very adversely, I would say, by dictating the work practices. The productivity has been low, the efficiency has been low. So with the result, Air India under private ownership, Tata's ownership, will be able to improve. And they will have a lot of wealth coming in. If the work practices are restructured, you will find Air India really being of very great help to Air Tata to build upon it. And I'm looking forward to it, because once professional leadership comes in, number one. Number two, government has no role to play in it in decision making. So decision making will be faster. The board representation will be there. They'll get the professionals on the board, and they will be free to recruit departmental heads as per the needs of the company, rather than a ban in a government setup where you can't inject talent from outside at the senior level. So these are basic, simple things: professional leadership, professional management, freedom to get people who are needed for the company's marketing, public perception. And the bigger thing, of course, as we all know, once Air India gets transferred to the Tatas, and which will happen soon, you will find the public perception also changing. Public would say, well, Air India under Tatas mean quality service. And that will go a long way.
Indeed.
So the load factor that we have, the occupancy factor, which is the lowest amongst all the airlines in India, will go up significantly.
Indeed, those are really important parts. But since you mentioned, the professional environment there and the work culture also, Mr. Bhargava, I'd like to bring you back here on one aspect, and that is, the future of the workforce there, because the deal itself says that for 1 year there can be no layoffs, and after that the permanent employees can be given VRS. How do you see things moving ahead? Obviously, Tatas would want to bring in, professional management in place, ensure that the work ethics are, lived up to a particular standard, and that's pretty much required of a national, international airlines also.
Tata is a business house which is known for the humane touch. So employees will get transferred, and government has stipulated that for 1 year, they have to remain on the rolls of the Air India. Well, this is done. But let's put it this way. Of the 12,500, 13,000 permanent employees on the rolls of Air India, there are 2,000 plus pilots who will be needed by Tatas for later years as well. Likewise, aircraft maintenance engineers. Let's not overlook the fact for the last 20 years, Air India has only recruited pilots, aircraft maintenance engineers, and cabin crew. There can be no doubt as far as the productivity of the pilots is concerned, because for a particular aircraft, if there are 2 pilots needed in a private airline, so are they needed under government airlines, so there's no difference. Aircraft maintenance engineers and cabin crew, I would say yes, they have a pivotal role to play in Air India's revival. So work practices will have to be restructured. They have to be made efficient and productive, which is not a difficult task at all. As I said earlier, it's a leadership that has to be provided. There has to be supervisory control.
Indeed.
Because it's normal human tendency that if you are not monitored, the laziness comes in, you get into a certain comfort zone and you stay in it.
Okay.
So this comfort zone will have to be abolished by the Tatas and said, this is what you need to deliver and we will be supervising you. And if employees fail to deliver, I have no sympathy for them. I would hate to see Air India being burdened with people who are inefficient.
Indeed, and that's something which we will have to wait and watch as to how Tatas will tackle that aspect, Mr. Bhargava. That's very aptly summed up there by you. But let's look at very other important aspect of this entire issue, and that is the issue of disinvestment. Mr. Bajaj, I'd like to bring you in here. Since in your first response you mentioned how by this stake sale in Air India, the government has showed a lot of faith in the private sector. Now, there is a lot of talk about a push for disinvestment there, and obviously private sector will have a very, very important role to play. What is the industry's, point of view, industry's perspective, taking it from here onwards as to what is the sense that the industry gets?
From an industry perspective, it also becomes a positive move because one, it shows that this government is converting intent to action. Second, the government and the finance minister announced in the budget a number of other divestments and privatizations. In financial services, there's two state-owned banks, one general insurance company. We have the IPO of LIC. And then there are many other government companies which are non-strategic, Concor, SCI. So I believe that this gives greater confidence to the private sector, to investors, that the government will move ahead with speed and with confidence because they know now it can be done. For the government also becomes really important because we are coming out of the pandemic now. We need to support growth in the country, and by not being burdened by some of these companies, the government will have additional money to put into India to help those at the bottom of the pyramid and to spur growth. So I think that becomes very important as well. So all in all, I see this as the start of a very significant move. And keep in mind, as I said, I'm not an airline expert, but people need to travel. Airlines do exist all over the world. It's a challenging business, but so is every business. It's all about being globally competitive. Okay. And in the right hands, in this case with the Tatas, there's no reason why we should not regain the glory of Air India. Okay, indeed, pretty much clear out there. Airline business is all about travel, and traveling is something which is not going to go out of fashion soon. In fact, Dr. Kaul, you mentioned earlier that, with the Indians traveling more and more abroad, there is a lot of opportunity for Tatas here. So, two aspects before we bring this to in discussion, and let's take them one by one. First, from your perspective, what are the key challenges which Tatas have now to revive Air India?
Well, the key challenge is to put the whole thing together. I mean, Air India is a legacy airline. When I say legacy, it means it has some old cobwebs, old union agreements which were very, very regressive, which are not good or healthy for a competitive airline. So they have to get rid of these things. They have to get rid of, junk which is lying around and make it lean and a modern airline. Okay. And there's lots of things that have changed over airlines. I mean, the low costs have come in a way which has disrupted the old legacy airlines. So they have to reconcile the two and they have to manage it. So there is a lot of fine-tuning which will be required by Air India to put Air India back to where it belongs. Okay, indeed, there it is. Thank you so much, Dr. Kaul, Mr. Jitendra Bhargava, as well as Mr. Sanjiv Bajaj for sharing your views and insights with us and our viewers on this very key important decision which has been taken of disinvestment of Air India, and the Tatas have once again, become the owner of Maharaja. They're back in the cockpit there. And a lot of challenges, as our experts were pointing out. Indeed, there have been a lot of legacy issues. It has been a loss-making airlines, huge debt there to be served, a part of which will be taken off by Tatas and majority by the government of India. But we'll keep a close watch on how the turnaround of Air India happens, and we'll bring another discussion with you here on Sansad Television. Keep watching. Thank you.